Hello and welcome back to another episode of BARROW Podcast. Today is going to be another solo episode. Today we are looking at the book The Basketball Diaries by Jim Carroll. So I was thinking about a couple of things. I was thinking about diaries in a continuation from our last book episode. And I was also thinking about my first trip to New York. So it was 2009, October of that year, and I got into New York, dead of night, and the weather was cool, getting colder, and we had a little apartment in Spanish Harlem. And I had gone on this trip with the intention of seeing Jim Carroll give a poetry reading at one of these places that he used to frequent. And if you don't know who Jim Carroll is, I'm going to talk about who he is in a second. But yeah, I had intended on my sort of checklist of things to do in New York to go and find this aging rock star poet and see him do some spoken word, see him do some poetry readings. The first day or the first days after we got in to New York, you know, we were finding our bearings, a little bit jet lagged, and we began venturing out, exploring the city. And one thing that I started to notice was everywhere we went, in all the bookshops, including there used to be a bookshop inside Grand Central Station, the train station. There were these pyramids of Jim Carroll's diaries, the Basketball Diaries, and another book called Forced Entries. And I'll talk about that in a little bit as well. But I remember being kind of wowed by this because at the time you could not get a copy of the Basketball Diaries in Australia. You would have to special order it, and it would be marked up to a premium because of the export, the cost involved with exporting it. And no bookshop stocked it. But suddenly, I'm in New York, October 2009, I'm exploring the city for the first time, and everywhere I go, there are these stacks, these pyramids of fresh copies of the Basketball Diaries and Forced Entries. And by the way, if you're watching this on the YouTube channel, I'm holding the book for people who are just listening. It's funny, this is the last copy of anything I have by Jim Carroll. I intend to go and purchase more things. I let someone borrow my copy of Forced Entries. They never gave it back. And I used to have multiple copies of the books, but I've just kind of given them out over the years because I'm a huge fan, and that's kind of what I do. If I love a book, I'll try and get multiple copies and just kind of like hand them around to people who come in and out of my life. But so suddenly there's all these pyramids of these books that, from an Australian perspective, I've not been able to get my hands on. And I'm there with the intention of finding this guy in some capacity or going and seeing him give a reading. And I'm going, this is so crazy, this is so weird. It's almost like it existed for me. And I remember where I purchased my copies was at St. Mark's Bookshop, and bought multiple copies because they were so, relatively affordable compared to the price of books in Australia. And it was because he had died. He had just died. He had died on just a few weeks before I got there. September 11, 2009. September 11, obviously connotation there, but yeah, just coincidentally he'd passed away on September 11, 2009, weeks before I'd arrived. And I was really affected by that. I was really sort of haunted by that. And I have these memories of kind of walking around New York, reading the diaries, and being on the subway reading the diaries. And it's funny because on the last book episode I did with Mum, I was kind of disparaging of diaries to a certain extent. Not overly so, I don't think, but I was kind of like, well, you know, I'm sort of mixed on why they're produced and published. They're usually not so affecting, but one of the most affecting books and one of the most significant books to me is The Basketball Diaries by Jim Carroll. And that's my little story about going to New York for the first time and having that kind of more personal story. I'm just going to read a tiny little section so you can get a feel for it. Where are we? What's a good section? If you never do anything to make yourself seen, like really seen, the type that makes people point, then you don't deserve to be seen at all. That's my theory. And not only on a basketball court. To look good while you're doing it is just as important as doing it good. And combine both, and you've got it made. Presence is where it's at, but not the going out of your way to be noticed presence, but sneaky, shy presence. Though it's all apart, you're still always aware. Presence like a cheetah rather than a chimp. They've both got it, but Chimpy gotta jump his nuts around all day to get it. Shy cheetah just sits in total nonchalance or moves a sec or two in his sexy strut. Like it's easy on the court. You dunk a ball, dribble or pass behind the back, make a super layup out of an easy one, but not obvious you had to do it, then get fouled on it, say, and just walk to the line like you don't hear no oohs and ahs. Put on a "didn't you expect it?" or "you dopey bastards" mug and walk lazily, looking down all around you like you were looking for the jock you faked off the dude who was guarding you. By the way, I don't know why the fuck I'm writing this shit. Some dude asked me, so I've been thinking about it. Actually, I ain't trying to sound like Helen Girly Brown or shit, dig it? But if you see some dude acting like this one on court, and you can figure how to do it other ways, you know where the dude is at. Fuck it anyway, I just couldn't think of anything else to write about anyway. No dope, no nookie, no queers following me today. I guess you start writing lame diaries like this. So, who was Jim Carroll? Okay, so he was a musician, he was a poet, he was a writer. He was also kind of like a high school sports star. He got a scholarship to play basketball for a posh Catholic school, and he was a heroin addict. And the book details all of these things. The influences on his writing, from what I can decipher, have been people like Rainer Maria Rilke, Frank O'Hara, John Ashbery, James Schuller, Allen Ginsberg, and William S. Burroughs. You can definitely feel the Burroughs and the Ginsberg in these books if you read them. He published his first poetry collection when he was still in high school, and then later went to work for Andy Warhol. And he's associated with the Warhol's factory, if people are familiar with that. I believe, I believe he might have. I'm trying to think. I think I could be wrong. I believe he worked on script writing, perhaps, for Warhol's movies that he was making. And I think Carroll even was more associated with Warhol's like film output and the cinema. I'm pretty sure Warhol had like a theatre as well. I could be mixing something up there, but I'm pretty sure that's the trajectory. In any case, he's affiliated or associated with that period of art making in New York. The Basketball Diaries was published in '78, and the Forced Entries, his other book of diaries, was published in 1987. And they're called the Downtown Diaries, 1971 to 1973. To be honest with you, the Forced Entries, the Downtown Diaries, they're arguably, and I use the word very loosely, but they're arguably better simply because they capture this incredible period of art making in New York from 71 to 73. And there are references to Allen Ginsberg. There's actually this hilarious story involving Ginsberg and a sex toy in those diaries. And there's also he has like an exchange with Salvador Dali that's really, really funny. I think Dali thinks he's homeless, and Dali's got a cane and sort of like swats Jim Carroll out of the way when he's trying to get a taxi. And there's some other kind of celebrity references. The book begins with him and the girl he's with in an apartment picking picking crabs out of their pubic hair and racing them across a coffee table. And it's got that kind of like seamy, disgusting, junky kind of vibe. You know, again, you can see all those influences of like William S. Burroughs and again Ginsberg and all that kind of thing in there. But yeah, if you like that sort of thing, if you like transgressive writing, like transgressive fiction, if you like the beats, if you like punk aesthetic, I guess to a certain extent. I'm kind of iffy on using the word punk, just generally, because I think too many things are described as punk, and punk got really commercialized in a certain way. But, you know, for lack of a better term, punk, there's a little bit of a punk aesthetic going on in Carroll's work as well. So if you like that kind of grungy punk beats, I don't really like the term, but dirty realism, transgressive fiction, don't even love that term particularly. But if you like all that kind of stuff, then you probably know what I'm talking about. That's all associated with Carroll. And it's definitely the stuff I really enjoyed when I first started writing. And I related heavily to this book. I mean, there was the Catholicism, Catholic boys' school aspect to this that was resonant in my life. There was, obsession with sports, with basketball in particular. I'm still pretty obsessed with sports and basketball, but I used to play a lot. But then I guess the tension that arises, maybe for young men, I don't know whether it's necessarily gender specific, but that tension of like, you know, what am I going to choose? What path am I going to choose? You know, Carroll, it seems to me, quite credibly could have gone on and had like a real athletic career. He chose poetry and heroin instead. And, you know, as someone who has had those kind of forks in the road of like, which path am I going to go down? And we all have, let's face it, then his work is quite resonant, I think. If you've ever had, you know, substance abuse issues, I have, certainly. You know, again, the work is resonant. There's all sorts of things in this that I really enjoy, and there's all sorts of stuff that comes up for me I think I've said it before that I really like what I call like a neighborhood story, a neighborhood feel. I mentioned that when I did the solo episode on the Uptown Local. Books that I'm thinking of are things like A Guide to Recognizing Your Saints, is another example. I might actually tackle that on the show as well. But yeah, I really, to use a Carroll term, I really dig all that kind of stuff, right? Neighborhood stories, sort of scruffy around the edges, dirty, a fork in the road, choosing the wrong path, going down, the rabbit hole a little bit, I really enjoy that sort of stuff. So Carroll is probably known better to other people as a musician. He was part of, they're categorized technically as like a new wave punk band. They were originally called Amsterdam, and then they became the Jim Carroll Band. They got signed with, I wrote a note here, they got signed with Atlantic Records, and then they had the Catholic Boy album. That was their debut album in 1980. And I'm going to put a link in the description to this episode, but I wanted to play it, but copyright issues prevent that. But like, People Who Died is one of their like top songs. And People Who Died is like, I don't know, it kind of encapsulates in a lot of ways what I'm talking about when I talk about a neighborhood story, a neighborhood feel, like that kind of mythos of the street, the legend of the street, the folklore that comes from, urban living. As I say, the Uptown Local has a little bit of that in it. A Guide to Recognizing Your Saints is a really good example as well. And the film adaptation of A Guide to Recognizing Your Saints, I'm going to talk about the film adaptation of the Basketball Diaries in a minute, is good. You might also, if those things resonate with you a little bit, you might also like, and something else I'm thinking about is like the photographer and filmmaker Larry Clark. He made Kids, Bully, a number of other things, quite graphic and confronting material, but there's something there that I call it like the neighborhood feel, the neighborhood story. People Who Died, the song, which I'm going to link so you can listen to it, that really encapsulates that. Carroll really is singing about people who died, the young people he was around who passed away in his neighborhood from all sorts of reasons. There's a cancer story, there's a drug overdose, there's a suicide, there's all sorts of things. And like, depending on the neighborhood you grew up in, like, I don't know, I remember those stories. I've got those stories myself. I've got the suicide story. I've got the, guy I used to hang around with who's incarcerated. I've got the, the dude who used to hook us up with drugs, who, was murdered, I've got those stories like in my bag, in my closet. And, there's a feeling there that certainly resonates with me. So let me read another little excerpt from the Basketball Diaries. I'm trying, it's probably easier if I try and do a Jim Carroll impersonation, but I also really don't want to because that could be embarrassing. Here goes. Saw Bobby Blake today, a kleptomaniac, speed freak friend, in the train on my way to school. He told me he was out on bail and had a trial coming up next week. I asked him what happened and, no lie, dig this. He got drunk Saturday night along with his usual super shot of speed, and he's on his way home at 3 a.m. On this quiet little street, he decided to break into Gussie's soda fountain and check out the cash register. Tactlessly, he threw the door of an old refrigerator that was lying around in the street through the glass door and climbed in over the glass, still zonked as a doggy. Then he makes his way to the register but can't get the thing open, so he pushes it around some more to no avail. He gives up on it. As he's about to get his hot ass out of the place, he looks up over the fountain, sees a sign of a giant ice cream soda and gets an incredible urge for that, plus a grilled cheese sandwich. So he goes behind the counter and lights the stove, puts butter in the pan, makes a cheese sandwich, tosses it into the pan and the pan onto the fire. Then he goes about making an ice cream soda using 6 flavors of ice cream. I always wanted to use those syrup pumps and those professional ice cream scoopers and shoot in that seltzer the way old Gussie does, he told me. So he finishes making the soda, whipped cream and all that, and he brings it around the counter and sits on a stool and starts into it. Then in come 2 cops, not believing for sure anything they see. Bobby, not budging but biting away, cash register wrecked on the floor and the grilled cheese sandwich, which Bobby forgot about, burning to a crisp. He must be on one of those hell-infested drugs. SDS, my ass, you dumb harp, Bobby said, and he rapped the cop for 10 minutes about how he worked there and just happened to be passing when he saw what happened and was wishing for an ice cream soda besides. They took to the wind in several directions. Bobby, in his usual manner, stood his ground and offered the man a free pair of work pants as they dragged him off to the station. They took me away, he told me, with my grilled cheese still burning, the dumb bastards. So, the diary entries, for the purposes of what Mum and I have been doing and what I've been trying to sort of, coach her on a little bit, is like, again, the diary entries are really, really short. Again, if you're watching this, I can hold them up. You can see how short some of these are. And you can see this one. So, for example, that just goes over 1 page. So 1 or 2 or 3 pages long, never more than that, really. So again, it brings in these ideas of that we've been working on, like vignettes, okay, scenes. And again, I've already said, but on a personal level, there's all sorts of relatable themes that come into that and how they fit in with family, with a person's individual story, what cultural factors in a family might cause someone to end up, on heroin, for example. But mostly with the Basketball Diaries and why I have chosen to spotlight it today, it's just such an awesome example of style and voice. So it perfectly captures Carol's voice. Carol's voice is the style. It is the book. And it's an example of how you can use voice to drive a story, that sometimes all you need is a good voice. And it's also a demonstration of how voice can be and often is, as I've said, style itself. Voice can be style. That might not get across to everybody listening to this, but certainly I do intend to write in future more about like the writing aspects that intrigue me and flesh out what I mean. For example, when I say voice is style or voice can be style. I want to read maybe another section before I wrap up with the film. Actually, you know what? I'll just do that in reverse order. I'll talk about the film and then I'll read a little section and then I'll move on to something else. So I was obsessed with the movie. I haven't gone back and watched it because, well, I just didn't think to do it, to be honest with you. It's got Jim Carroll. It's got Jim Carroll. It does have Jim Carroll in it. He makes a cameo appearance in the film, but Leonardo DiCaprio plays Jim Carroll. It's like one of his earlier roles, I would imagine. the guy who directed it didn't really do much else. I think he directed like one other movie. He's not really anybody of note, but it's got some really interesting and good performances from Mark Wahlberg, from a guy called Bruno Kirby, Ernie Hudson. There's, again, it's sort of like a cameo from Juliette Lewis. She's always great in stuff. And Lorraine, I can never say, Lorraine Bracco, Melfi, the therapist in Sopranos, plays Jim Carroll's mother. And she's great in the film as well. Ernie Hudson's really good in the film. Wahlberg is great in the film. He's like, he's kind of a caricature of himself these days, but he's actually really good in the Basketball Diaries. You kind of don't notice that it's Mark Wahlberg. He's more just the character that he's playing. And yeah, no, I think it's like terrific performances from everybody, and definitely worth checking out. Like, that's a good movie. I don't think it has like a particularly high rating or anything like that, but it's good, and it's a faithful adaptation actually. I think it gets a lot right, and it's certainly one of my favorites from, you know, my earlier days. I've got a DVD copy somewhere around the house, and I might bust it out and watch it again, but it's definitely worth checking out. And it's also a good example of, like, if you want to see Jim Carroll, I know he's sort of playing, he's like a cameo as someone else, but he's kind of playing himself a little bit and talking to DiCaprio as like a younger version of himself. It's kind of a good scene, and you get a feel for his voice and his presence. I think they kind of capture him quite well. So for all those reasons, it's worth checking out. I'm just going to wrap up. I'm going to read one more little section to give you another little flavor, and then I'm going to move on to something else I want to talk about. I'm going back a bit in this diary today because this strange episode's been hitting me on and off most of the day. Crumb day, I might add, the really boring type. Rain. I was about 9. My friend Kenny and I would spend a lot of time hanging around the cellar of our apartment house, mostly tossing a ball back and forth or listening to the radio. The superintendent of the place, Buddy, was a jolly dude who was the laziest bastard on earth, but who, when bugged enough, would and could fix anything any tenant had a bitch over. He's an on and off drunk who is totally on lately, so his job seems hanging on pretty thin wire. He digs us, though, and let us hang out around like the older cats who would play big card games in the boiler room. It was a seedy and dark, smelly place, now that I think about it. I guess that's why I dug it. I know these other guys, in fact, that hung around in an old, busted-down news truck for about 2 years without once realizing what a boring idea it was. This particular day in mind, something really strange happened. Kenny and I were flopping around as usual watching the card game when one of the older guy's younger sisters, Sharon, who was about 13 and a little funny looking with a lot of makeup, and her friend Lulu dropped in. After Kevin and I moved into the bigger room, they followed us, watching us play baby baseball for a while, and suggested that we go into the radio room and check it out. We got in there, and they immediately suggested that we play a little game that was unfamiliar to both Kenny and me. Doctor. We said, great, how's it go? Well, Lulu piped in, the game is, in this case, nurses. Now you and Kenny take off your pants and Sharon and I give you an examination. Total mystery to both of us, but we follow nurses' orders and drop our little jeans. Kevin peeked over at me and I peeked over at him. And realizing our young pricks were more or less the same size, we gave cool smiles. The two girls gave cool smiles too, in fact. They immediately whipped off their dresses to even things out. And they literally did even things out. Because I knew girls were different than boys in that sense, and that's what was baffling. You see, it was my first exposure to drag queens, and I noticed to my complete surprise that they had little peepees too. last thing for today. Today's going to be a shorter episode, I think. Just want to give a shout out to another writer, poet, musician. Well, he was a journalist, from what I understand. A guy I came across via social media, Richard Cabut. I don't have my hand on hard copies of Richard's work at the time I'm recording this, but in my build-up to doing the Basketball Diaries, I ended up listening to Disorderly Magic and Other Disturbances. So you can find this audiobook on Spotify. Richard reads his own work. And I thought it tied in with Carroll really nicely, like punk and voice, you know. There was a rhythm to Cabot's work that I really enjoyed. And it got me thinking about a lot of things, but I realized that, you know, I follow a few people on social media and I'm always looking out for, you know, people that have an aesthetic or something about them that resonates. And I, in the lead up to doing this book episode, came across his stuff and I was like, oh, I might try and just like plug that, because I know he also has a new book coming out by Far West Press, which is called Ripped Backsides. By the time this episode airs, the book will be out, and I'll tell you a little bit about all of this in a second. But, you know, in a lot of ways, Cabot, you know, Disorderly Magic and Other Disturbances, you might call it like a book of poetry. I don't know whether that's like the most fitting thing, because it's a combination of so many things, but it got me thinking about, and the diaries got me thinking about, you know, what we might do with memoir. What are some other ways to express our memories and our experiences? Could you do a poetry collection? Could you do spoken word? Could you record an album of like spoken anything? It just offered other possibilities. As I say, I've engaged with and consumed Disorderly Magic and Other Disturbances as an audiobook. Listening to Richard read, and that was like a really great way of doing it. I intend to purchase hard copies of that book as well as his new book. That just hasn't happened yet. But there was the last, I think, track, I'm going to call it a track, Ghost Music. Man, that was really great. And it was, I really recommend people go and check this stuff out and buy a copy of the book if you can. But it made me think about hauntings, and it made me think about this process of memoir writing is in some ways being haunted by memory itself. And what do we do with that? Like, do we capture that? Do we try and push it away? And another reference that sort of came to mind while listening to Cabot's work was someone else I intend to look at on the show. And in fact, it's probably going to be an episode sooner rather than later. Patrick Modiano, the French Nobel Prize winning author. There's some Modiano quality there about hauntings and, you know, the historical past sort of looming over our lives. So Disorderly Magic and Other Disturbances. It is a book. There's also been like a special edition release, and this is actually the thing that got me hooked, and I wanted to figure out what was going on. They have something called a soundscapes cassette, and it's the same reading of the work, but it's got some musical backing to it. But this was being released through Far West Press as a cassette, and it's this like bright pink cassette. I'll put a link in the notes for people. They can go check it out. You can purchase it if you want. But I like the temporary nature, and this felt quite punk, I guess, of making art within a specific medium. Like, you can only listen to the cassette if you have a cassette player, obviously. And I like that. I like limiting the consumer and forcing them to engage with the art, but also making it temporary, giving it a shelf life. You know, like that cassette, there will be a point where you can't play that anymore because it will degrade. I thought that was really cool. But anyway, I'm just going to read like a little blurb. Disorderly Magic and Other Disturbances is a pop meditation on a number of themes: speed, delirium and distance, disillusion, urbanity, various manifestations of the idea of the wilderness and the wasteland, madness, dissolution, memory, mourning, forgetting, hauntology, hauntings. There you go. Rapid transits, the non-existent, and conjuring the future, the work mixes, magic, culture, mystery, memoir, history. There you go, memoir, history, melodrama. It is an invocation and evocation with dreamlike freedom of movement between past and present, from personal to universal. So check that out. And check out Richard's new book, which is called Ripped Backsides. Both are available from Far West Press. And I just want to give them a plug, and I'll link to them. But Far West books are raw. This is what they say about themselves. They contain dangerous active ingredients. They travel with you in your pocket, printed in pocket paperback size. I love that personally. Far West writers are musicians, film directors, degenerates, and poets. They write what they want, all in 100 or so pages. Far West books are found at your favorite bookstores, your neighborhood bodega, and on the shelves in your cooler, older brother's room at this very moment. Far West is now an independent publishing press, started in 2020. So they're new guys, new kids on the block in the world of publishing, and they're doing really interesting things. I thought I'd give them a plug just simply because, you know, the things they're making and publishing and producing, and the writing of Richard Cabut, it just seemed to fit nicely with this consideration of Jim Carroll and my experiences of, you know, going to New York looking for somebody who was like still reading their work. You know, I spent a long time in Australia sort of digging through old bookshops and trying to find the Basketball Diaries, and I just like people that are, you know, producing things in the moment that may not find a home in like a traditional big publisher. I got a lot of love for people who are making real art, and I have a lot of nostalgia also for you know, a period in time when the Basketball Diaries would have been published. It's unfortunate, but you might say about a lot of things today that wouldn't get done now, that wouldn't get made now, that wouldn't get published now, which is really sad, because I don't understand why. Why not? why not? That's it from me. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week, of course, with a non-book episode, a regular episode. And I think the next book that we're doing is possibly Travel Light, Move Fast by Alexandra Fuller. Let me check. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Okay. So the next book will be Travel Light, Move Fast by Alexandra Fuller, and that episode will be 2 weeks from now. Okay. Until then, until next week, from both Mum and I, thanks for listening. Bye.